thank you for coming to our panel. Thanks for coming to Gen Con and being willing to hear us prattle on for an hour. So my name is Luke. I will be your moderator for the next hour, and the title of the panel is the Creative Millennium, RPGs at the turn of the century, and we have 5 designers and authors here who kind of straddle the millennium, kind of looking in both directions. People who were designing games in the 90s through the dark ages, and then people who were kind of raising the black flag in the early 2000s. So I'm going to do a quick round of introductions, and then we're going to get to talking. So I'll start at the end. It's Mr. Jonathan Tweet. Jonathan Tweet founded Lion Rampant, Lisa Stevens, and back in the 80s. You all right?
He's books.
Wait, all right.
I need to go get my books.
All right.
I'll be right back.
We'll be right back.
Just got to go into the dealer's hall for a bit.
Difficult.
Lion Rampant published an obscure little-known game called Ars Magica?
Yeah.
Is that how we say it?
Yeah.
All right, straight from the horse's mouth. Great. And Mr. Tweet went on to design and publish other games, Over the Edge, reworked Talislanta, and was involved in a small relaunch for Dungeons & Dragons. Vincent Baker came onto the scene with... Look at this. Came onto the scene with a rather provocative game called Kill Puppies for Satan, which produced probably the best fan mail for any game ever. And it is probably
very sincere.
very sincere. It's probably best known for his work on the role-playing games Dogs in the Vineyard and Apocalypse World. And then Mr. James Wallis. I believe, did your first game, Once Upon a Time? Oh, yes.
Yeah, that was my first published game with Richard Lambert and Andrew Alston, my co-designers on that.
There you go. You then went on to found Hogshead?
Hogshead Publishing. Actually, just before that, the Journal of Interactive Fantasy, the Journal of Role-Playing and Storytelling Systems.
I am not going to be able to hit all of your illustrious merits, sir.
Don't worry, I will.
But,
4 issues. Yeah.
4 issues, yes.
Hogshead, under James' stewardship, published another small title called Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. And James also, very relevant to our discussion, kicked off what in the 90s was known as the new style RPGs, and published his own game, Baron Munchausen, under that as the flagship under that banner, and games by designers like Robin Laws and Greg Kostikian, as well as others. Yep, and John Tynes. And also Nobilis.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And Ron Edwards is the... This is great.
You have people to clap for you.
Ron Edwards is the co-founder of a website known as IndieRPGs.com, where he was a vigorous poster, commenter, author, and proposed many insights into the way RPGs work and the way they're played. He is a designer himself and designed a very influential role-playing game known as Sorcerer, as well as Troll Babe, Slay With Me, Spion, Circle of Hands, and many other titles. And Jared Sorensen is a writer and designer who actually began his RPG publishing career publishing a supplement for Sorcerer known as Schism, and then quickly published a trio of incredible small indie RPGs, kind of setting the bar for the rest of us.
Thank you for not saying peaked. I appreciate that.
We'll make jokes about that later. Octane, Inspectors, and Lacuna are kind of still these milestones in indie RPG development. And Jared's current project is Parsley Games, where it's just a live action text-based adventure, and we can talk about what that means later. All right, so this was
Who
my
are you?
idea. What's it?
Who are you?
Yeah. My name's Luke Crane. I'm a I'm a designer and publisher. I'm known for Burning Wheel, Mouse Guard. I'm also the head of games at Kickstarter at this moment. At this moment, as far as I know, I feel like I've been at Gen Con for 100 years, right? I'm gonna go back to Civilization, and like the Statue of Liberty is gonna be sunk, and it's just gonna be singing about the harbor. I'm like, you did it. So this panel was my crazy idea, and I want to dismantle the notion of these fixed kind of decade or generational blocks of design. Basically, right? There was D&D in the '70s, and then there's Greg Stafford in the '80s, and then there's Vampire in the '90s or something, right? And this is, I believe, to put it mildly, unhelpful notion. Design is a conversation. And it is not only a conversation between two human beings, it's a cultural conversation where we are all playing one another's games, and those interactions spark thoughts and spark new designs in completely and beautifully unanticipated ways. So I thought we could maybe try to demonstrate that with these fine gentlemen. All right, I'm going to start with Vincent. Because Vincent has kind of a legendary story in my mind. So Vincent, I believe Ars Magica was very formative for you.
Yes.
And so would you say it's the first RPG that you fell in love with, or?
No.
Okay. All right. Okay. That's fine.
Let's find out.
But was it the one you played the most?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Hands down the game I played the most.
Tell us a brief but funny story.
A brief but funny story. Okay, so I wrote Kill Puppies for Satan, and I can tell you why I did that if you want to grab me afterwards or whatever. Maybe Luke will ask me. I don't know if he cares. But I wrote Kill Puppies for Satan, and I sent it out as fan mail to Jonathan Tweet and some others. And there's a lot of Ars Magica, forgive me.
Doesn't matter.
There's a lot of Ars Magica in Kill Puppies for Satan, if you look for it. There's a lot of it in my later games, especially Apocalypse World. It's all through Apocalypse World. But, so I sent it to Jonathan Tweet, and you wrote me back.
Yeah.
And you said, and I said, oh my God, I can't believe he's writing me back. I'm kind of doing that. I said, I'm not going to tell you about my 15-year Ars Magica game with, 80 named wizards and probably 250. We've played with about 20 people over 15 years in these rolling campaigns across. And you wrote me back, and you said, Ars Magica, you designed that for campaigns where you designed Over the Edge for characters.
Yeah.
And I said, that's obviously true. How on earth did he do that on purpose? And I've been thinking about that ever since.
Yeah?
Ever since.
Doing things on purpose really is one of the secrets of game design.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And harder than maybe you know.
I mean, I'm not joking.
Yeah, I didn't have a laugh up here.
So James.
Yeah.
So you quickly took on the mantle of publisher in the RPG world, right? It seems like you actually went to Jonathan with your first game, asking for him to publish it at Wizards of the Coast, right?
That had the potted version. I started role playing in 1982. I started my first fanzine in 1983, and then second fanzine as soon as I got to college in '86. And so I'd been publishing, and I loved publishing. I got a huge kick out of putting stuff together. And then I thought, I've got to make a living. I trained as a journalist, and I did some books for other people for Palladium. And once upon a time, could have happened almost by accident. And it's kind of a footnote to this, so I won't go into that. But yes, I had been kicking around for an idea for a game called Bugtown, based on the comics of Matt Howarth, since about the late 80s. And these were bonkers comics, hyper-violent, stylized, set in an infinite city where entropy works backwards. Anyone born there can shift at will between parallel universes. it's great. And I'd got a really interesting diceless, numberless mechanic system. It was all verbal. And Eric Wujik, who at the time had just published Amber Diceless, the first commercial diceless role-playing game, said, I want this, let's develop it together. We then spent, as I recall, 2 years going over the outline. Eric was both a perfectionist and a control freak. So it became clear the game was never going to happen through Phage Press, his company. So Jonathan actually came to stay with me in London with his wife, and we took a stroll, and he said, you've got Bugtown, I'm the new head of RPGs at Wizards of the Coast, we're interested. And so we hammered out a contract, and I took it to Matt Howarth, who did the comics, my collaborator on this, and he went, I don't like the t-shirt royalties. And I went, they're fine, and role-playing games don't sell t-shirts. He went, I'm not going to budge on the t-shirt royalties, I want more royalties. And Wizards of the Coast, quite reasonably, went, who is this arsehole? And went, well, if he's not going to budge, we're not going to budge either, and this is not the kind of guy we want to do business with, no deal. And then about 6 months later, WotC closed its RPG department, so probably for the best. But so I was left with an almost complete RPG.
Wait. So, all right, so, yes.
Where is that?
Wait, so, hold okay. All right, but the story
This
of
is,
Bugtown...
I'm going to go through this really, really fast. So I had an RPG.
I don't believe you, but okay.
I had an RPG. We'd started Interactive Fantasy, Andrew, one of my co-designers from Once Upon a Time, and I, this quasi-academic journal about role-playing systems and storytelling systems, interactive narrative, essentially. We should have called it interactive narrative. We didn't. We called it interactive fantasy. We had that, and we became aware that the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay license was available, and I'd worked out a business model that I understood why all British role-playing companies since Games Workshop had gone bust, and it's like, this seemed like an opportunity to start a company, we'll do Bugtown. Then we got screwed by our distributor really badly, so I had to shelve all the plans apart from Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, the cash cow, for 2 years. I had to lay everyone off, including Andrew, which was very, very sad. And then, just as I'm pulling myself out and the company out of the pit, I get a phone call from Matt Howarth going, it's been 9 months and you haven't published Bugtown yet. He said, yeah, we were with Eric for 2 years. You may remember it while he dicked us around. He went, I've been talking to Eric, and he's made me an offer for Bugtown. And I said, can I make a counteroffer? He went, no, the deal's done. It's back with Phage Press now. And at which point, I went to bed for a week because this was a project I'd been working on for 5 or 6 years. And
I just ate a copy of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I just physically ate it so I could do this.
Yeah, pretty much. I like Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. It's a game. I have literally never played it. It was taking it on was a commercial decision. It was not a
All right.
So anyway, you may also notice that the Bugtown role-playing game never came out from Phage Press. Phage Press lasted, I think, 12 years, published 2 books in that time, both by Eric Wujik.
Well, fair enough. Okay.
Anyway.
All right.
So, yes.
From that perspective, the question
Yeah.
I was going to ask you 10 minutes ago
Sorry.
was, so from the perspective of shopping around innovative games and not getting them published, but then also going on to publish them.
Yeah.
So come 2002, right? 2001, 2002, 2003, I believe this is when you first started to encounter what we would call indie RPGs. Sorcerer, you.
Yes.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah.
So I actually was wondering, so from your perspective of having gone through that mill as a publisher, like, what were your first thoughts when you found Inspectors of Sorcerer or Dogs in the Vineyard? Or
I was incredibly excited. Jonathan actually showed me his copy of Kill Puppies for Satan at Gen Con 2002, and we had the new style line of these short format games. And my first instinct was, this is a perfect new style game. And my second instinct was, actually, I'm here at this show to try and sell my company because I'm about to burn out. Sadly, history would, I think, have been very different if we had published Kill Puppies for Satan.
What were the t-shirts royalties for that?
Well, it turns out they were not high enough.
It's
That might have been worth it.
having someone take your ideas, whether it's a direct lift or just the basic idea of kind of a short format RPG that doesn't necessarily require a GM in the standard way, which was kind of what the new style thing was all about. And seeing other people take these ideas and run with them and start to produce new ideas and really exciting, new, different ways of doing things is flattery of the highest form in games design. Having other people... There's no copyright protection for game mechanics. No one can get precious about this shit, unless you're Wizards of the Coast patenting the tap mechanic for Magic.
Which didn't work.
It was really, really exciting. And at the same time, I had set up the Diana Jones Award for Excellence in Gaming. We started in 2000, awarded the first one in 2001, which went to Peter Atkinson for all his work basically saving TSR. This was before he'd taken over Gen Con. The second one went to Ron. And the Diana Jones, it's decided by committee. It's a mostly anonymous committee. People go, oh, it's just your mates. Yes, it is just my mates. You would be surprised who some of my mates are. But yeah, it was, and it's a consensus decision. Yeah, there is voting, but it was like, okay, so year one, the primary figure of the industry at that time. Year two, scrappy little indie game. The best thing of the year, the most excellent
Very
game.
cool. Very
so
cool.
yeah.
So great. So, Jared, Ron, in the late 90s, you two were both very active in internet fora, which as an aside to that, which I believe the Gaming Outpost and Indie RPGs actually kind of replaced the zines that Jonathan and Wallis, James Wallis, were doing in the late 80s and early 90s. But your own designs are starting to ferment at this point. You're starting to think about next steps. But So how do you get there? Like where did you come from to get to that point? Hopefully that is related to someone on this panel.
You're going to be really happy with my answer.
All right, okay, great.
Because it's short.
The idea that I'm going to base my whole answer on is that throughout the hobby at all times there is this ongoing ferment of game design in everybody's desks and backpacks and hard drives and everything just happening all the freaking time. And that has been happening since well before 1974.
Yeah.
And so this is an ongoing thing. It's happening all the time. It was very visible in terms of publication in the late 70s as, you know, Jeff D at 17 and Jack Herman go, oh, Vigilantes, right? You know, that kind of thing happening. All those games are what today we would call indies. Then, most of the 90s in particular, that became very hard to see. It was hard to get from the desk and the backpack onto the shelves and to have any chance of lasting there more than 6 minutes. Okay, what I'm trying to say is that I was a part of that ferment and in touch with all of this stuff long before I ever made myself more of a visible figure.
Great.
So I will give you an example. WotC, while a certain somebody had published Everway with WotC, and I am clutching Everway, I'm also clutching my alpha deck of decks of Magic the Gathering. And whatnot. And I submitted a role-playing design to Wizards of the Coast called Gray Magic, which has a certain influence from Magic the Gathering. They, of course, returned it to me unread because this is a litigious society, as the cover letter carefully explains to the unwashed individual out there who had sent them an unsolicited manuscript. They sent it back to me, and I was like, because that had happened at the exact same moment. My sorcerer hack of Cyberpunk, the first manifestation of that game, the hack of Cyberpunk called Sorcerer, just returned to me in exactly the same form from Alatar Sorensen.
You can just see Mike saying that, no thank you.
I just talked to Mike today, as a matter of fact. To clarify, so here we are talking about the early 90s at this moment. We very much are, because at that moment I am writing to Matt Howarth because I can't get certain issues at my comic book store of those annoying Post Brothers, which I desperately want, and he very kindly is interacting with me about sending me these issues at exactly that moment. And so, therefore, to say that I, quote, came in later is very interesting. Yes, in terms of a commercial presence in role-playing, I came in later. But when I met James and Jonathan and other people, Greg Stafford in particular, I want to give deep acknowledgement to here. This was not a novel meeting. This was a finally bringing the boats next to each other, and it was very, very exciting. And Jonathan said to me, "Yeah, Sorcerer," when he met me, because somebody had probably a serendipity circle is my guess.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, and so so therefore, the point being, and I've said it 1,000 times, there isn't a creatives versus fan-based division in role-playing the way there is in many other groups. The people who design are those of us who have a slight personality disorder. And that's all, right? But I mean, those of us,
Yeah,
right?
it's the same
And-
population.
Yeah, exactly. And then within that, there's the severe form who for some reason wants to publish what they've designed. So,
It's called the people with enough money to publish.
yeah, and so pretty much, well, that's the way it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other people just twitch, you know, in the throes of their condition. And that's what I was doing, right, with my little manuscripts. I was twitching in the throes of my condition. I didn't have certain other individuals who were intimates of mine who were capable of putting those up there. So therefore, I am saying that to me, it was phenomenally important upon finishing my master's in 1992, contracting chickenpox, which I had never had as a child, and this turned out to be, in retrospect, 4 to 6 months before the vaccine was available. Yeah, extraordinary case. Chickenpox, leprosy level, and I was laid up and helpless, in agony.
I mean, this
and
is the
all
English
I could
patient
do,
you're talking
and
about.
all I could do, all
This is
I
the
could
English
do was feebly pull out my the other Steve Jackson fighting fantasy books and play them feebly, right? And thinking to myself, well, this is such a simple system. What is with all this this Rollmaster hack that I'm trying to work on, for my fantasy game ideas? What am I doing? And I was like, that's funny. And I'd been, was playing looking at Magic a bit later, and I was like, that's funny. This is actually kind of like this and that. How come we don't do this in role play? Anyway, so and then of course I remembered that back in Melee and Wizard we did.
Yep.
So anyway, but I'm going through all this, but now I'm in an altered state of consciousness. And
Where's this going, Ron?
because I bought in that altered state of consciousness perfectly appropriately Over the Edge.
Oh, good. So actually, let's pause there. So actually, Jared, I want
At the same time.
right. Meanwhile, so Jared, you,
In near
Is that
Gorham,
making
Maine,
my
I'm
point, though?
driving
This is all being put together.
in my friend Brendan's red Isuzu Isuzu Amigo, I think it was, and I'm in the passenger seat. We had just gone to a game store. I saw this weird role-playing game with centipedes on the cover and a dude with a noose around his neck inside and a William Burroughs quote. Okay.
This is a game planet, I think is the quote, right?
Yeah, this is a game planet.
Yeah.
Where have I heard that before? Talk about that later. And I'm in the passenger seat going, Brendan, this game has, you have one skill. And he's like, what? And I'm like, your skill is like FBI agent, and you have like a 2 in it. He's like, is that good? I was like, I think a 3 is better. But it's still, he's like, well, what does that mean, FBI? That's not a skill. I'm like, it's like all of the skills. He's like, what? I'm like, I'm gonna run this for you guys. And my first ever campaign was 3 glorious sessions of Over the Edge. Bizarre. One game took entirely place on an airplane to Alamarha, where I actually had my players sit in airplane seats, arranged in the living room, and I was like, there's a dude with a plant on his lap. There's a dude compulsively checking his watch. And I just waited for them to start talking to each other because they're on an 8-hour flight to the Mediterranean. And I was prepared to wait 8 hours. We're going to play it in real time, and I was prepared to wait 8 hours for them to go, so what's with the plant? And it was awesome.
So would you say that any of that carried forward into Octane or Inspectors?
Yes, none of my campaigns have been more than 3 sessions long.
All right. So Jonathan,
Lacuna is a supplement to Over the Edge, right? I mean, is it not?
They're all supplements to Over the Edge.
So Jonathan, 2000-ish, I believe you had conquered the world at that point. You were King Conan sitting on your throne, right? With your
Lamenting.
Conquered the role-playing game world, maybe.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
Which is the world.
Yeah. Well, as we know now, we do rule the earth. Nerds run free now, thanks to your efforts,
Yep.
right? So from the height of your throne, I'm just gonna run with this. A totally unplanned, terrible analogy. So So you're in a very specific world at Wizards.
Yeah.
Right, and you're
That's right.
obviously working very intensely for a number of years on this game. In which I imagine, was that process different than, was that a new process?
Super new.
Okay.
Super different.
And did you feel like you had become disconnected to the community? Because obviously, like, you know, the number of games that you had designed up to that point,
Yeah.
you were very connected to the design community.
I totally felt that it was a very different chapter in my game design history, because what I had been doing before were things like Ars Magica and Over the Edge and Everway, every one of which, you know, is here's a new way you could play a role-playing
Right,
game.
right,
Here's a new way you could play a role-playing game.
Right.
Right.
Here's an old way you can play a role-playing game.
And then this is like, here's a better way you could play the old role-playing game. But you know, it wasn't about me and how cool my ideas were, and it was not, and it wasn't a new paradigm or a new what have you. The one thing that I think made it very similar, if anything, can make Over the Edge and third edition similar. It is the freedom to create your character. So I want to.
You opened up the class. You opened up that possibility. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to plus on what you said about we're all the same population, creators and players, and that's one reason why I felt that it would be worth my while to devote my career to this industry, because it's one of the few industries, entertainment property systems in our culture that encourages people to be creative and not just to suck up everybody else's brand name characters and repeat them. And
So you have to be creative. I mean, that's kind of the point, right? It's not just encouraged.
You have to be creative. You have to be creative, and you can. Yeah, exactly. And so in third edition, we did try to make it a lot freer for what kind of character you can create. That's the similarity. But no, it's very, very different.
So-
Very much, aiming at a different audience and with a different
Right.
goal.
So that also was it was relatively finite process. Like it was a
Yeah.
few years, and so you come blinking out into the light again, right, from the giant dark cavern in which we designed D&D, which still exists. And you know, and there's a new breed of RPGs that have sprung up while you were kind of distracted. Like, so can you describe some of your first encounters with? I think Sorcerer maybe was one of them, or
Well, Kill Puppies for Satan.
Kill
I got really early, and you probably hot off the press when you.
Hot out of the copier.
Yeah. That had a more, kind of a more formal structure than Over the Edge, and it was interesting to see this, on one sense, very free-form and open-ended game that sort of has a more discipline to it. And I think that's true of, like, Apocalypse World and whatever has sort of more discipline to it than my games do, and what have you. And that was really eye-opening. And then Sorcerer is another one.
But there are some others to look at. There was Orc World and Hero Wars were both two, I would say, pop in right at that moment, just in the sense that these things are cropping up.
Yeah,
and obviously different, you know.
Speaking from my experience, I learned from Sorcerer. So, like, for example, in Sorcerer, you said if your character is honorable, that's not like a cyclim from Champions, and it limits how you can play your character, so that gives you more points. Right. And it's not even like a bonus, like the virtue honorable from Ars Magica that makes you stronger in some statistical way. It's a dramatic stat. It says this is the kind of drama my character is going to be involved in. How honorable are they? Under what conditions are they honorable? Will they ever be dishonorable? And that's not a number stat. That's not a conflict resolution stat. And that
Interesting.
really opened my eyes. And you'll see that now in the new Over the Edge that I'm working on. Every character has a question mark, which is a part of your persona that is going to come into question during the campaign. So you could have a Over the Edge character whose question mark is honorable, and then everybody knows, just like you say in Sorcerer, that's going to come into question. And maybe they'll be
that's what it's
honorable
there
the whole
for.
time, and
Right.
that's fine, and maybe they'll be dishonorable at the first chance, but that's
It's on the table. Yeah.
Yeah, it's on the table. It's sort of like the dramatic pole in Hillfolk 2, right? Where you can be, am I devoted to the mob or am I devoted to my family, right? And you can go either way.
So James, I just want to actually circle back and follow up on something we were talking about earlier. But so you said you're burned out at this point, early
Yeah.
2000s, right?
Yeah.
You've been sprinting for 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, it's also I just got divorced. I had very briefly, the worst week of my life. I asked my wife for a divorce on the Wednesday. On the Friday, I'm made redundant, and as I'm walking home carrying my possessions in a cardboard box, I'm mugged so badly that I need plastic surgery to rebuild part of my face.
Oh, good times.
And then on the Sunday, I had a job interview in Chicago with 3Com, Ray Winninger's division at 3Com. So I turn up looking like a panda. Ace that, get food poisoning, get on the plane back with food poisoning, and George W. Bush is elected. That was the worst week of my life. That took some coming
so what
back
RPGs
from.
were you playing?
Never mind the details.
So my life was kind of in disarray. Also, at the same time, the industry was going through the D20 glut. Hogs had all been about creating products which would have a long shelf life. We would put a lot of work, years of work in some cases, into these games, like Nobilis 2. And then we would expect them to stay around in the market for years and years. And with the D20 glut, product had a shelf life of weeks, if you were lucky. Retailers were just cycling this stuff. And that was not our business model, and I did not want to change the company's direction to just churn out product. So it's like, okay, I've taken Hogshead as far as I can. If we continue going, we will go bust. I'll see if I can find someone to buy the company, or at least buy the game rights.
So that's very interesting. So one of the shifts, but especially between the 90s and the kind of the indie RPGs in the early 2000s is actually the publishing model, right?
That's what the indie RPGs thing meant.
Right.
It was not a design school.
Right.
It was an economic movement.
Is that something like is that from that perspective, from that perhaps rather tunnel perspective there, is that something that you could see at the time, or even can you reflect on now, like how where instead of building up companies with lines and publishing
Into distribution.
how right and going into distribution, how these did you see that at the time that these companies or these individuals were saying, no, this is my game and I'm going to go direct to consumer and I'm not interested in a publisher?
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, that stuff had existed. We have to remember.
Right, it's always
Yeah,
existed.
as you may tell from my accent, I'm British. I don't have the American perspective that you guys do. But in the UK, you'd go to any games event and there'd be someone selling their little fantasy RPG, and it'd be deeply traditional, but it would be theirs, and they'd probably run off 200, 300 copies at the local printer, and they were selling direct to consumers, and they sold the 300, and they were happy with that. That had always existed. Munchausen, because I had a company that was selling stuff, we could push that out through the distribution model, and that was, lucky enough to get traction that way. But at the same time, Munchausen was summer '98. People were already selling ebooks and RPGs as PDFs. Terry Austin, in particular, and a bunch of others. And then drive-through came along. Print on demand came in pretty quickly, and the ability to sell directly to the customer was what broke down all the walls.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, the availability of cheap desktop publishing software, the ability to burn PDFs without having to pay Adobe a lot of money. I observed earlier in the show, anyone who has an idea for a game these days can become a published publisher in half a day. You burn your PDF, you set up an account with drive-through, you're a publisher. Right. I had to start a limited company and get an overdraft at the bank and find an American printer in an American warehouse, because if I'd done that in the UK, I'd have gone bankrupt, because that's what British companies did. So yes, it was the emergence of new, I'm not going to say business models, because I think fundamentally an awful lot of the pioneering role-playing games are labours of love. Munchausen was a passion project for me because Hogshead was supposed to publish my games and in 3 years hadn't published any. So it's like, I've got this 24-page thing. I'm going to push it out there just so there's a game out there with my name on it, and I don't care if it succeeds or fails. It's mine and I love it. And I'm prepared to lose the company money on doing this. And I had no idea if it was any good. And I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this. Yeah, the passion projects. We do this because we love it, not because we necessarily want to make money out of it. Anyone who starts off going, I'm going to design role-playing games because I want to make a living at it. It's like, you are so in the wrong business. Oh my Lord, the old joke. How do you make a small fortune in role-playing games? You start with a big one.
All right, so Jared, you wanted to offer a comment there.
So you mentioned Ray Winninger. So I was working in a gas station, and I got a copy of Mutant Chronicles, and I got a copy of Ray Winninger's Underground. And I remember sitting there reading these, like, these are amazing. This is gorgeous.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Well, Underground is like full color, weird graphic design, super like high tech looking book. And I was like, I could never, ever, ever make this or afford to make it. And I was also a vampire player, so I was looking at like the Vampire 2nd edition hardback going, this book is like a work of art. I could never do this. And then fast forward to when Munchausen comes out, and especially Puppetland, which I encountered first on John Tynes' website as some HTML pages. Yeah. And I remember emailing, hey, we should work together. You seem cool. And he's like, thanks, I'm busy. And then he, I didn't know he was busy turning his occult, his New Inquisition setting into Unknown Armies, which would later, I would fall in love with, start writing fan material for that I would later turn into a supplement for Sorcerer because I couldn't get my act together with the Unknown Army stuff. But when I saw these new style games, and I'm like, oh wait, a saddle-stitched 16-page game is being sold in a store for like $8?
I
Something
think
like
it was either 5 or 6. I think we launched it at $4.95, and the distributors actually told us that was too cheap, and we needed to put
And it
it
was
up
like, oh.
because people don't value the cheap stuff.
Yeah. But then I was like, oh wait, I can't
Not
make
that too.
Ray Winninger's Underground with this full color art and 7,000 pages and it's gorgeous. But I could do this at home. That's, that's not a problem.
Vincent, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was going to say the first game I bought and loved was Cyberpunk in the box with the saddle stapled booklets, black and white.
Mike Pondsmith is
and
important in this story.
Yeah, he really is. So I never had that. I was always like, yeah, I could make that.
Right.
And so that's how Kill Puppies for Satan kind of looks.
Yeah, okay, all right. You don't need to raise your hand. Just be a gentleman. Offer a comment. Go ahead.
So what all of this is pointing out to me is that the threads continue to intertwine. A very good example is before some of the bad stuff in your story, but after some of the bad stuff in your story, I encountered you at Gen Con 2000. And I told you that I had a little game called Elves that I thought would fit very nicely with the new style stuff.
Yeah.
And you sneered down your nose at me and informed me, well, yes, but we are interested in publishing, and you said carefully, like maybe I needed help with the word, innovative.
I have no memory of this. I was probably drunk.
Are you drunk now?
Yes.
And so, it makes perfectly good sense that I would get this answer in the circumstances you're talking about, which of course I knew nothing about. And so, but a year later, I was getting the Diana Jones Award. So from being, the spot on James's shoe that he was desperately attempting to scrape off, all of a sudden there was this shift into a different kind of perspective. But that's just showing the intertwined things.
Can I just point out 2 other games that Hogshead Publishing turned down? We turned down Unknown Armies, and we turned down Dread. I'm a fucking idiot.
We should all be such idiots.
Dread?
is all I had to say.
Which Dread?
Dread, Jenga 2. Dread.
Oh, James.
That's my friend at the Diana.
But I had a meeting with him and Elf and Wood Elf. And I think it was 2002. I was getting prepared to shutter the company. But they showed me this. It's like Jenga. That's an MB game. It's you want to package your role-playing game with that? I don't get it. What if someone jugs the table? And that was
The answer is everyone dies.
The thing I wanted to finish with was that you mentioned that it was infrastructural, a very profound infrastructural change that permitted what we were talking about. I am saying that is the return to the 70s. Yeah. That I had grown up with buying little stapled pamphlets from not a game store, Did you say game store?
Right.
This was the little hobby store annex next to the gas station. Thank you very much. Where we bought our little,
Nice.
you walked past the khaki, different colors of khaki. Did you know there are different colors of khaki?
Did you go to,
Paints. And so
did you go to
know,
games
again,
events at this time too, Ron? And-
Not the first games event I ever attended in my entire life was Origins 2000.
Okay. All right.
I had no contact with gamer culture of that kind.
Interesting. Oh, it's clear.
And so, but what I'm saying though is, yes, that infrastructure was the ability, was the big change. But I had been so frustrated at the loss of that 70s up through about 1985 culture. And I did not regard the glossy new RuneQuest, the glossy new champions, the new Shadowrun thing and FASA and all these glorious, splats, and I did not regard that as a good thing. I was, my little anarchistic soul was, I want my grubby pamphlets back. We are grubby little people, and we leave these grubby little pamphlets, and
Just
I want that.
go to the
Right.
museum and check out what games used to look like
Right,
when they
yeah,
were
right.
professionally made, and it's like
Yeah.
little boxes and little booklets and little Ziploc bags.
It's
and like,
amazing.
Which is where we are again.
Pick
Yeah.
up AD&D first round, 77 through 79. I did that recently, and I was like, my God, this is
there's nothing there.
this is no good. This is, and at the time we were like, wow, look at that, it's in Walden Books. So anyway, the thing I'm saying though is that I wanted the recognition of that restoration to be proud. And that's, I remember saying, and much to ridicule, that one of the reasons that the Forge closed was because we won. That's what I was referring to. That now a person can say, I'm working on my game and I'm predicating this on having control over how this game is going to get out there, and I think I have some ideas on how that can happen the way I want. And what would happen if a person said that in 1997 in any industry context?
It was
they would
harder.
have been shamed and silenced.
Yeah.
Not just said, given advice, but shamed and silenced, because that's what I encountered in 1997.
So
That's the change that we struck for.
very interesting. So all right. So based on that, so for James and Jonathan, let's break the format slightly here. So skipping ahead a decade now from the time of inquiry, or a decade or so. It's been quite a while, hasn't it? You're both working on new games, or recently completed new games. And do you, looking back now, do you see influences, strands that you've pulled forward from this moment or this movement? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in 2013, I did 13th Age with Rob Heinso, and so that's D20s, swords and spells and owlbears and hit points and all that stuff. But
Owlbears.
I mean, you got to have owlbears. But it's way more freeform. It's more story-oriented. The combats are faster. It's still sort of on the crunchy side compared to a lot of the stuff, like say Sorcerer or what have you. But we totally stole ideas like failing forward, where rolling poorly on your die means that you didn't get what you want from that task resolution, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your character personally failed. Right. It
Sorcerer
could-
and sword. Yeah.
and so, yeah, I'm definitely pulling that in. I'm doing with Over the Edge. I'm redoing that. It's going to be on Kickstarter, and so that's an all new setting and all revised setting and an all new mechanical system. But the every character has a trouble stat, which is the circumstances under which they would get into trouble, and that's defined as doing something more fun than the smart thing. Right? And so this is the time where you can screw up, and no one at the table can go, oh, that guy screwed up. It's like, well, it's in character for them to follow a puppy down a dark alley because they get in trouble when they think an animal is in danger or something like that, right? Well, that comes from, I think it's the instincts, right? In Burning Wheel, where there are things that are going to compel you into action, right? And everybody knows what they are, and so everyone knows sort of what the hooks are, and you can together tell a more character-oriented story.
Right. So James, you have a book there. You have a Las Vegas there.
Finally, 4 years late, this was kickstarted. This is Luke's copy.
Show them. Show everybody. So would you say that design picked up from where you left off in the 90s? Or?
No. I mean, this is hugely influenced by a lot of the games I've read. I don't play that many role-playing games, to be honest. I have young kids. It's simply difficult to schedule. But I read a lot. And the main thing that I took away that a Las Vegas draws on is the fact that there is now a big audience for games that are not traditional role-playing games. They are role-playing games. It's post-Gygax Sorensen in the sense that there's a GM and players. A lot of the stuff I think about doesn't even do that.
Yeah, a lot of my games do.
But beyond that, it's a generic system of 20 pages of what I call the fugue system, which is rules specifically for characters with amnesia. You start the game with amnesia, so your character sheet is literally blank, apart from your physical features and what other players tell you about yourself. Did you know you had a tattoo in kanji on your back? What does it say? I don't know. I have amnesia. I can't read kanji. So things like that. But as you go through the game, any time that you're in a situation where you need an ability, you have a flashback to your previous life and you remember yourself using it. So you get the ability, but you piece together your previous life. And that is completely out of GM control. It is the players who do that, but part of the mechanics are about the way you jigsaw those pieces together and integrate each other into each other's flashbacks. So it's, and I'm really pleased with it. And then Las Vegas is the first campaign setting, and it's structured. The genesis of the idea was it's like an HBO miniseries. It's 4 episodes and you're done.
Right.
That is the end. Those characters are finished.
That's a variable worth talking about. actually.
And then because it kick-started really well, there's 3 other campaign settings in there. Gareth Hanrahan did a time travel one, which is brilliant. A couple of French guys did a lunatic superhero one. And Johnstone Metzner did a fantastically dark fantasy one. Again, based on the amnesia trope. And I know there's a market for that. There's people who are willing to try formats of role-play that they've never tried before. They don't want more D&D fanfic, as a friend of mine calls it. They don't want to play the same game with a slightly different genre attached. They want new experiences and new ways of telling stories, new ways of creating and being and inhabiting characters. And that's enormously liberating because, as I said, when I did Munchausen in 98, I had no idea if there was a market for this at all. And Munchausen, it's a half-hour game. It's a 3/4 of an hour game. It's a throwaway. I have to say, on the subject of production values, the production cost of that game was the printing. Everything else was done for free. All the art is public domain. Yeah. It took me back. I produced it like it was a fanzine, and it was lovely in that regard. But now, it's like the walls have been knocked down. They did feel like, in the late 90s, that there were walls around roleplay beyond which an awful lot of people were not willing to go. And I think that part of it was because there hadn't been a new edition of D&D for a long time. D&D, the whole thing was enormously hidebound and traditional. And then D&D 3 came out, which is still my favorite edition of D&D. No, I'm not going to go to an anecdote.
Yeah.
And that kind of things started moving forward, and at the same time, the walls started pushing back, and the cracks were appearing. But at the same time, there were these rodents zooming
really,
through,
sir?
and bigger and bigger, and the tunnels were getting bigger and bigger, and and we were getting through to the other side, and people came aware there were communities on the other side of the wall, and the Forge, I think, the community, there's a whole other town on the other side of the wall. And you could cross back if you wanted, and you could come back to D&D if you wanted. It wasn't territorial. It wasn't like they'd chop your head off, most of them.
So Vincent, we've got time for about one more.
Yeah.
So Vincent, take us home. Rodent Vincent.
Prairie dogs in the video.
So since Kill Puppies for Satan, you've designed a couple other games.
Yeah.
But draw a line from here, or string a thread back to Ars Magica. Like what Magica?
Yeah. How's Apocalypse World informed by Ars Magica?
Yeah.
for example?
Is it? Can you draw a thread?
Yeah, heck yeah. I mean, but it's a million little technical things. Like you bust open the Heartholder playbook and you find, like if you look at it side by side, you find the what was the Covenant book?
Yeah. Like the one with the 4 seasons of the Covenant.
Yeah. It was a book, and it had all of these lists about how you create your covenant at which season, and that's exactly the Heartholder. It's exactly the chopper in Apocalypse World.
And the Heartholder is someone who has a fortress.
Right, they have a fortress.
Sort of like Ars Magica, you've got a wizard's tower. Or
Exactly. And in
So is that just an homage reference, or do you feel like that?
Function.
Is that a design fundament you built on?
Well, that's an interesting question.
Like,
I mean, that's
It
one
is.
class.
No,
but
it
okay.
is. Because what happened in Ars Magica is we got together and we did that together. And the players were making those choices. And the players were creating the Wizard's Tower and the communities and everything.
Yeah.
We always played Troop Style, we always played
Yep.
co-GM'd.
Yep.
And in Apocalypse World, it's the players making the decision about the world they're playing in. You know, the Hardholder character has the most invested in this fortress, this stronghold, and so the Hardholder player is the one who makes the choices about what it's going to be like. And ooh, exciting.
Yeah.
And that's right out of Ars Magica.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
right out of it.
Yep.
Does that answer your question?
yeah, absolutely. All right, any last words, gentlemen? Before
I
the-
just
the-
realized-
before the pit opens up underneath us. And
I just realized that, yeah, Lacuna is, I'm going to make it official. It's officially my unofficial supplement to Over the Edge. Because I just realized the company is there somewhere, and it's what happens when Over the Edge characters fall asleep. And it's the system you would use for that. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, it's the William Burroughs quotes,
Yeah, it's all there. It's
Yeah. Cool.
sorry, thank you, you're
Yeah.
welcome.
No.
my take is that the threads continue.
Yeah.
Apocalypse World relationship to Sorcerer is very strong.
Yep.
My
Absolutely.
my work with Troll Babe was deeply informed, even though the first version of Troll Babe precedes Dogs in the Vineyard.
Yeah.
The two games have danced ever
Absolutely.
since. And secondly, I would say that Circle of Hands was profoundly influenced by what I learned, scratching my head over how Vincent was so good at X, Y, or Z. But it's not just Vincent. I mean, this is, Jared and I have been in a design dialogue, both verbally and on paper, since 2000. I mean,
Yeah.
easily, just without unceasing.
You reference Lacuna in terms of Spion.
That's true, yeah. And another thing I want to point out is that 3 people came up with 3 games that had exactly the same burning, shall we say, traumatized questions in their heads. And they wrote these 3 games, each one addressing the same questions, although the games were not exactly the same. But as soon as you read it, you knew you were talking to a brother in arms, a fellow survivor of the same things. And those were Burning Wheel, The Rill of Steel, and Sorcerer. They are brothers. Those are 3 games that you read together and you go, my goodness, now I see what the issues are. Sure. So it wasn't just influencing each other, it was discovering each other. You're not alone.
Vincent,
You're not alone.
did you have a comment there?
Yeah, I do. So you write to me, yeah, I did that on purpose. And I say, and then I go to Ron and I say, Ron, how do you do things on purpose?
You're right. I think our system does something. System does. Matters.
Premise matters.
Yeah.
Cool.
Premise role-playing was like, that was like,
That's the idea. Isn't that a synonym for saying playing on purpose? Because you can't design on purpose unless you have some understanding that somebody out there played on purpose.
Yeah.
Yep.
Super cool.
And that's what was being lost culturally in the overt rhetoric of role playing in the 90s.
Yeah.
Either of those.
there's a story where you play by accident.
Yeah.
Was early 90s stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all. Thanks so much for being here and for joining us for this conversation. I had fun. Hope you all had fun.